Owen sent his list too, so.
Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is the only interactive mock draft simulator. The interactive mock draft simulator has fans mock drafting against the picks of other fans every time you do a mock. This is a first-round challenge, which has fans identify their 5 best first-round picks, and fans of the other 31 teams will be mock drafting against your preferred first-round pick. There is a second-round challenge on the simulator, which allows fans to identify their 10 best 2-round drafts, and this will adjust the draft board so that fans of other teams are mock drafting against your best first and second round picks. The Draft Professor has ranked players functionality. This allows users to rank players at their positions and group them in tiers to be able to compare with other draft boards. The Draft Professor has draft a team functionality, as you see here. Draft a team allows 2 or more users to each snake draft a 22-player team, and you can use this to identify your my guys or identify the depth of your draft board, and it allows users to do a mock draft a much different way than any other draft simulator. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Thank you. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I am Jim. I am joined by Josh and Newt. And today we're going to be going over some defensive line rankings. But before we do that, Josh, how are you?
Good. Glad to stop in on a Thursday while we got Thursday Night Football going on, but we got the Bears playing the Seahawks, so hopefully I'm not missing too much. But good to jump along on this interior defensive line ranking, which in this draft last year was offense. This year is defense. That's going to be the main calling card, and there's a lot of quality guys, especially once we get into the second round, third round, fourth round. A lot of guys that are going to be filling out those rounds in the interior defensive line room as well as the edge group, but it's a really deep class, in my opinion. I'm excited to talk about it.
Newt, how are you?
Oh man, I'm doing well. I'm jacked for tonight. I think kind of along that line, especially if you take the defensive line into a little bit more of a magnifying glass. I think this group is special compared to last year, if not, last couple of years. I think you talk about top 100 guys in recent past. It's a couple names that might pop. I think this year's got a good chance to have a good handful of guys that are going to be making an impact. Maybe not their rookie year, but definitely on that rookie contract, putting some big contributions forward for their team. So I'm excited to talk about these guys tonight.
Fantastic. So also, I just want to give a shout out. So Newt, there's no it's not a Packers game on tonight. So while there is a game on, it's good. That we don't have your eyes.
Josh can see what it's. I'll say Josh can see what it's like to podcast with me where I'm not, wearing my TV screen the entire time. That was a hell of a game. That Thursday night game, Lions Packers. Damn. It was just from a football standpoint, but obviously I had more invested being a Packer fan. That was a great game.
No, I don't blame you to do the same thing.
So we're going to kind of summarize the work that Newt, Owen, Josh, and Clint have done. What was it, the last 7 weeks?
I think 6-7 weeks, yeah.
If you, Newt, if you didn't know, I think we were doing this since, election day.
Yeah. I was saying, I remember, I coach high school soccer, and I think we were talking. I was like, hey, the minute the soccer season's over, I'll hop on that Thursday. We can go from there. So early November, it's been for sure.
So I am going to share graphics from Newt and myself. And while Newt and Josh are kind of talking through this, I'm going to get Josh's graphic on the screen. Josh made it just in time, so it didn't quite make it for the live podcast, but I will add it. But I think the way that I'll kick this off is when we originally discussed this, and I think it was like 3 weeks ago when Josh was on the podcast with us. Josh had Walter Nolen in a different spot than he does today, but looking at how somebody sees Harmon, Grant, and Tyleik Willams is going to help you define floor and ceiling of a defensive line. So, for example, Derrick Harmon probably has a higher ceiling than Tyleik Willams or Kenneth Grant, but the floor for Grant might be higher than Derrick Harmon. So those are some of the things that as you're looking at a defensive line big board, that maybe we could kick this off with, I guess, Josh, you want to kind of talk about Mason Graham and then kind of kick that off to Newton. While we're doing that, I'm going to try to throw your graphic onto the screen.
I got you. Yeah, let's go over the defensive line one in this draft class. And I think that's been settled since the beginning of summer with Mason Graham. You just turn on the playoff run last year. You saw how dominant this guy can be a force in the run and pass game. Really smart, high football IQ, knows to attack the stunts and twists really easily. He uses his leverage to an advantage. Really well-rounded prospect, all in all, can overwhelm interior offensive linemen in the run game. Plays with good leverage. I love his play strength and his use of hands to disengage with blockers. He shows really good promise as a pass rusher. May have taken a step down this year in production total, but the use of hands is still there. The counters are still there for me. I think this is one of the more polished pass rush tools for interior defensive linemen in this class. And even though Michigan didn't have the season that we all anticipated, it was definitely not in part to Mason Graham. He obviously made his presence felt in that Ohio State game. Really, if Will Johnson wasn't such a dominant person on the outside for that Michigan team, Mason Graham would be the one really highlighted from that team, even though he already is. For me, this is a bona fide plug-and-play starter day one with upside to become a future All-Pro if he plays his cards right and develop properly. But if not, you're getting a really high floor with this guy, somebody that can start for you for 8+ years while he's still young. I really like what he brings to the table. For me, he's a top 5 player on my board. I don't think it should be an overthought or overquestion where people have him.
Yeah, no, I love everything you said about that. He's one of 4 blue chip prospects I have as of right now in this year's draft, and everything that Josh said hits that 100%. I think that what you see is not what you're getting, but what you see is a damn high floor, and obviously the work potential to go into what is going to be like that. Hopefully all-pro career. I said this when we were doing them last week in terms of like the breakdown. He reminds me a lot of Aiden Hutchinson. Obviously, 2 different players, but that Michigan kind of evokes it a little bit, where you have a guy that is dominant in college. He's got that nose to the grindstone, hard work ethic, and he comes in with that floor that you expect for a top 5 prospect. But he's going to work his ass off, and he's got the character, the physical tools, gifts, and then on top of that, he just has that mentality where he's going to push himself to be one of the best players that he can be in the league. It makes me think of that over and over and over. And I know it's the Michigan connection that does it, but I cannot get it out of my head. And it's why he's sitting number 3 on my board as a force to be reckoned with. I said, we haven't seen a guy like this since Jalen Carter. And I think that they're 2 different prospects. Jalen Carter, extremely gifted in terms of athletics, strength, speed, quickness. But I think what Jalen Carter didn't have is the character pieces that Grant brings to the table. And Graham's going to be a guy that really, really continues to progress and not settle for where he's at now. So easily consensus DT1.
No, absolutely. If you're trying to think of a player comp closer from Aiden Hutchinson because he plays on the outside, to me, he reminds me a lot of Christian Wilkins when he's rushing the passer. I think he's a way better run defender than Christian Wilkins was coming out. Now he's developed run defender, but the way he moves off the line of the scrimmage, his body control, the way he's able to use leverage to his advantage so easily, it's eerily similar to Christian Wilkins. playing that interior 3-tech role. So that's a guy you can think of comping to Mason Graham a little bit.
No, I love that. I'm actually curious to hear now that post the episode you were on, Walter Nolen is first round grade. I love to hear it. What changed, or where is he now?
So this is a guy that I'm trying not to compare to Byron Murphy because they're two completely different players in how they move. But I'm looking at a little bit shorter on the defensive line side, a little bit more stockier, but plays super low to the ground. And that leverage is something really rare, especially the way he can explode out of it and really work inside to outside on those pass rush moves. I think this is a guy that's ascended really good in his development this year while still having the untapped potential to be one of the more freakiest pass rushing interior defensive lineman. I love the versatility that he brings. That's something that we mentioned previously. I think its use of his hands has improved from his Texas A&M stint to his Ole Miss stint, and that's been because Lane Kiffin's had to have him out there on all 3 downs. He's been asked to do more. He's taken that responsibility on, and he's really handled that really well this year. I think this is a guy almost you're betting on the trace, but you also like what he brings you right away to the table. And an interior defensive line class where we're going to have a lot of guys in round 2, round 3, kind of all meshed together in the same little group. I think Walter Nolen has established himself as more of a higher floor compared to all those guys, but in my mind, also a higher ceiling. So I have him firmly in my top 30. This is a guy, if you're trying to pick the next best interior defensive lineman, one for you right now and one for the future, this is probably the bet you're going to.
Yeah, I like that. I think,
if I remember correctly, Josh, you had him at 35 on the last podcast. Yeah. So you moved him up to 30.
Yeah, right? He's in the top 30 right now. Yeah.
Right. And I'll still say that I still think Josh is significantly lower on Nolen than consensus. Mm-hmm. Right? That's still, even with him being at 30 with in the first round, you're still – he's still not as high as, at some point I would love to see your board to know, let's say the 10 guys that you have above him.
Yeah.
I'll say I got my consensus board puts him at 22 right now. So he's definitely kind of in that range for sure. What you're saying, Jim.
Yeah. And the only reason why I'm pointing that out is I think Nolen, is, I don't want to say polarizing is not the right polarizing is Omarr Norman-Lott, right? It's not like Walter Nolen is going to be somewhere between 20 and 40, but I think he's going to be closer to 20 than he will be 40.
I think the difference, if you take a look, and Josh, you know more about this than I do, but if you look at Walter Nolen, I think there's more projection that needs to be done with him, which is where you get that higher variation. I think he plays at a really high level right now. He's stout in run defense, and he's showed those tools exactly like Josh said. But there's pieces where you see Mason Graham, and if he stays where he is, he's going to be a damn good defensive tackle. If Walter Nolen stays where he is, it's okay, but it's not first-round talent worthy. There are things that he has to continue to do, but I think with his size, his athleticism, he has the ability to do that. And I think when you have these players that are a little bit more projection based, I think that if you look on the edge side, Mykel Williams is a really great example of this, who's going to be one of the bigger variance players because he's so much of a toolsy prospect and he has a lot of projection that's associated with them. I don't think Walter Nolen is as projection based as Mykel Williams is, but I think I would say maybe Derrick Harmon would be the other one that you could compare to him. I would think maybe even a little bit more. But you look at Graham, Grant, and Williams, I think those are 3 players that have a really high floor and are going to be able to plug and play a little bit more and are going to have lower variance because of that. Where with Harmon and Nolen, you're betting on those projections a little bit more. So I think that's where that variance comes from. I went through and got a chance to watch a lot more film for other aspects of positions. And I didn't change my grade on Nolen, but right now he's 17 on my board. So he's sitting pretty firm with that first round grade. He was 22 before, and a couple guys, those tackles dropped below him. So I think like Will Campbell scooted a little bit behind him and a couple other players. Not trying to have those guys catch any strays or anything like that, but he stayed where he is. I really, really like Nolen. I'm a little bit higher on him consensus. But I think that with the opportunities that this guy has taken advantage of thus far, looking at what he's done now this year, and it's not like he was it's not like he shrugged off everything before. He was a really, really solid freshman player, and he had a really good career before coming to Ole Miss, but he's continued to progress, and I can see him doing that as well into the league.
Okay. So Owen has just messaged me, there's a Wi-Fi outage in his area.
Damn.
So his service is out. So
Yeah.
Okay. So let's I'm gonna kind of like play point guard with a little bit of a game here. So higher floor, Newt, Walter Nolen, or Derrick Harmon?
Walter Nolen for me, I think, has a higher floor.
Okay. Higher
I think
floor,
Owen would disagree.
Okay. And Josh, higher floor, Walter Nolen or Derrick Harmon?
I would say Walter Nolen, but I would say Derrick Harmon has the potential to be the more well-rounded interior defensive lineman when it's all said and done.
We're going to flip this to ceiling on the next go-around. Yeah. Okay. Higher floor, Walter Nolen or Kenneth Grant?
Kenneth Grant.
That's where I would disagree. I have Walter Nolen.
Okay.
I have more question marks on Kenneth Grant.
Okay.
So when you say floor for defensive linemen, what establishes that you're saying Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolen has a higher floor? Like, Newt, what are you using maybe to determine where you establish the player's floor?
Right now, for me, what I've seen from Kenneth Grant is he is, and I want to point this out, like, I don't think Nolen is not a 3-down defensive tackle, but I think Kenneth Grant does it a little bit better. I think Kenneth Grant's tools in pass rush are a little bit more refined. I think Nolen has more. Like, I shared a clip on Twitter of Nolen hitting the swim, rip counter, spin move, and then like it was nuts against LSU. Like, one of the coolest sequences of moves that I've ever seen that really, really worked well. That was one instance, and I think if you can start to put that together, yeah. But I think that on a down-by-down basis, Kenneth Grant does that a little bit better. So for me, I think that the technique is a little bit better for Kenneth Grant right now. I think that the 3-down ability of Kenneth Grant is a little bit better right now, and I'm arguing like the slimmest of margins. I want to point that out. I could put on another game of tape of Walter Nolen's, and just from that game, probably change my mind and be like, no, I think Walter Nolen actually. So it's not much. But I think that there are two things that Kenneth Grant just does slightly better for me.
For me, the way that I view it is it's a balance between how much they contribute right away to the run game, between how much they contribute right away to the pass game. But I'm also thinking about it in a 2-minute scenario. If my defense is on the field fourth quarter, 2 minutes remaining, who can I leave out there that will give me the most production without losing stamina? Right now, that's where I question the Kenneth Grant stuff a little bit, is because he brings so many wonderful things to the table. But will he be able to produce that on a down-to-down basis, especially in the go-to-go habit scenario? And the stamina issues bring a little bit more question to me. I'd rather get someone that will provide that effort 100% of the plays in those 2-minute scenarios like Walter Nolen, even though Kenneth Grant will be better at stuffing the run and being able to execute those stunts and twists better.
I get that. I never even thought of it like that. I completely understand where those pieces come in.
So do either of you have comments on Kenneth Grant's arm length?
I didn't. So I try not to look at anything right now for like measurables outside of like what a school puts out, and they're not publishing arm length. There's nothing on film that made me like cause concern for me. So I'm not sure. Now, obviously, if it comes in, he's got 31-inch arms. I'm going to be like, oh, we need to take a look at this a little bit more. But I think with him playing on the interior, he's got a little bit more leeway. It's not like he's an edge rusher out there. He's on the interior. It didn't seem a detriment to me on tape. So there's nothing that I can comment on that as far as like something that I saw that scared me.
No, and even if that does become a concern once we get later into the draft process, Kenneth Grant's one of the few interior defensive linemen that bring those intangible things that really none of these other interior defensive linemen besides his teammate Mason Graham can bring to the table, such as staying with a play at 20 yards downfield, having the speed and agility for a guy that big, that heavy, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a give or go thing. Not every prospect is going to be complete and perfect, but he does bring some desirable traits outside of that kind of counteract that a little bit.
Okay. Is there any world where Tyleik Willams has a higher floor than Kenneth Grant?
I'll take the reins on this one. I believe so, day one. Now, once we start getting a couple years into the NFL, I think Kenneth Grant's going to establish himself and become bring a way better floor than Tyleik Willams is going to have. But the way Tyleik Willams defends the run, it is one of the better ones in this draft class. He's a proven starter for multiple years on Ohio State. He's trusted. He's a high IQ player. So that right away to the NFL is going to translate day one. And with those stamina concerns I have with Grant a little bit, I would say Tyleik Willams, but that doesn't reflect my grade. I have Kenneth Grant slightly over Tyleik.
So I like that as well. I'd probably give it to Grant just because of how close I already have him and Nolen. I think if you were telling me that they were going to go and I've got 3 downs to stop the opponent from getting a first down, Tyleik Willams out there all day long. Tyleik Willams might be out there ahead of everyone except Mason Graham. Mm-hmm. But for me, if I go back to some of the elements that I think of with Tyleik Willams, I don't think he's really providing right now a ton for me on third down in terms of, hey, are you going to be able to be someone that causes that quarterback to feel the pressure in the pocket a little bit? I think he can. I truly think he can develop into that. I think he's been such a good player for Ohio State, and I think he's done what's been asked of him there so far. I don't think that that's his ceiling, but right now I would lean Kenneth Grant because he gives me all 3 downs rather than just the first 2.
That's a good point to Newt's point. Tyleik Willams definitely does not bring that third down ability that most of these guys ranked below Tyleik definitely does. That's the one detriment you have on his scouting report.
And that's interesting. I think, how do I want to phrase this next thing? So if we look at the top 5 and the biggest difference between the graphic for Newt on the left and then my graphic on the right kind of echoed Owen's perspective for the top 5. And then Newt's influence took over at Rylie Mills further on down.
That's all that matters is that Mills is right there on your list, Jim.
Yep.
Yeah. But the reason why I'm asking this, I guess the statement I want to make is when you're drafting, like if you're thinking of your favorite team's DM and you're trying to, let's say, analyze, do they draft well? There's such a thing as start for you immediately, which it sounds like from Newt and Josh, you guys are in consensus that if Tyleik Willams goes to a team, he's coming into training camp and he's probably winning the starting job in training camp.
At least on second downs, absolutely.
Oh, right. The way NFL teams run defensive fronts in the league right now, 100%.
Right. And then he's further down on your boards because you're projecting what he will become, and you're basically he's 5th on the board because you think he is what he's going to be, and you're not going to see a ceiling on him that's going to project him more. Is that a fair?
I think for all of these, and none of these is like exactly the statement. I think Tyleik is the closest to what you see is what you get. But with that, I don't even think that pertains as true to him. Like I said, I think he can develop the tools. He's a good enough athlete. He's coachable enough where he can develop into I'm not saying that he's going to be, this stellar third down pass rushing defensive tackle, but I think that he can be a presence that is consistently pushing the pocket back. I think that with the other 4 guys, there's a lot of pieces that go into them. I think that Derrick Harmon is probably going to be the biggest variance in there because of that. That's why he creeps it down a little bit lower on my list. Truth be told, when I get the measurables and start seeing him in the combine, there's a world where he pops above Tyleik Willams for me because of those freaky things that Derrick Harmon can do. Derrick Harmon's he's not going to necessarily be the best on first and second down, but he's not bad, like by any means. Like he can stand in there and he could be almost a plug and play defensive tackle in the NFL on all 3 downs. I think for me, I want to see, what athletic things does he bring into the table? He's going to be definitely a big combine guy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bill, so few people in life ever agree with me. Thank you. Just thank you. That makes me feel good. And So my gift when it comes to the draft is being able to listen to the scouting reports that you guys are giving. And that was my gut instinct the first couple times I heard scouting reports on Tyleik Willams, is that there's a chance, there's a world where Tyleik Willams goes second in the draft because a team may not want to take a risk because Williams has the higher floor, and then the reason why Derrick Harmon was so high for Owen is he said he thinks that the problems with Harmon are the most easily correctable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he had him higher, right? So I think one of the detractions on Harmon is his missed tackle rate.
Yep.
And one of the things that Owen was saying, he says that's relatively, out of all the things to fix, that's one of the easier things to fix.
If we're talking about the interior of the defensive line now, we've gone over linebackers. That's one of the key focal points that we're talking about with linebackers, or missed tackle percentage. How easily fixable is that or not? On the interior side of the ball, there's many other elements that go into it. What type of run play is it? What side is it going to? Are you on the backside of the run play? Are you getting interfered by a backside guard, et cetera, et cetera? Few times is it really an interior guy really whiffing on the tackle in the backfield, except for the one or two times Ashton Genty make Derrick Harmon look stupid. But let's be honest, Ashton Genty made everybody look stupid this year. So when we're talking about interior defensive lines, missed tackle percentage is one of the easier things to fix. But back to your point, like you were talking about, Derrick Harmon and Tyleik Willams have identical grades to me, but I have Derrick Harmon one spot ahead of Tyleik Willams just because we're playing that game as scouts of what they are right now, production versus projection. And while Tyleik Willams absolutely is the better first and second down guy right now, and even though Derrick Harmon has taken leaps and bounds as a pass rushing force, they're not that far away from one another, even though Tyleik hasn't had the production this year. But if we're taking into the projectability of what Derrick Harmon can bring you a couple years into his NFL contract, we're talking about a world where Derrick Harmon's way more well-rounded than Tyleik Willams is, both being good in their own regard. So it's playing the game of projection versus productivity. What are they giving you day one versus year three?
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I've got Tyleik on my board, 37. I've got Derrick Harmon, 40. So they are, almost as close as you're going to see two similar prospects being. And like I said, there's a couple of things where, if depending on what I see for measurements and athletic testing coming out, one could easily pop up ahead of the other.
Okay, so Cincinnati Bengals right now, I think in the draft order, are 15th, and the Arizona Cardinals are 16th. So assume that Graham is off the board, right? I think it's a good assumption that Graham is off the board in the top 10.
No doubt.
And closer to the top 5 than the top 10.
Yeah.
Assume that the rest of the interior linemen are there at 15 and 16. Which players do you like as the best fit for the Bengals, and which player do you like as the best fit for the Cardinals?
I'll start. I would say Kenneth Grant would be a better fit for Cincinnati. I'm not talking about schemes. I'm talking about familiarity when you have with Chris Jenkins Jr. on his rookie contract. I think that's a guy you can plug and play right away, get some familiarity with Kenneth Grant while he's still learning to adjust some parts of his games that need to adjust to the NFL level. But I think if he has a guy that he's had many years of experience with playing alongside of him, it's going to make the transition a little bit smoother instead of putting Walter Nolen out there in Cincinnati, for example, saying, hey, you're playing 75% of the snaps, go hair on fire balls to the wall. I don't care what you do. Just do it. It's just trying to get the feel on who's going to be more comfortable year one, because that's the big thing. All these guys have talent in the world. It's how comfortable can they adjust to the NFL level, and how quickly can they catch on? Will it be the first 2 weeks? Will it be the first 2 months? Will it take a whole year before we'll figure out who this guy is? Or will it be Mozzie Smith and we'll never figure out who the hell he is? So
I like that. I'm gonna bounce off that kind of this in a similar direction, but not with a teammate. But I'm looking at Arizona just picking up Darius Robinson, and I think with that kind of player, I think that leans a lot towards Walter Nolen, where I don't want two of those guys. I almost want that true, like, hey, I'm gonna be your player in the middle. Where I would, if I was Arizona, I'd want Kenneth Grant probably over Walter Nolen myself, because I don't want to have two similar play styles like that. And if not, man, then maybe hope and pray that one of those guys in the second round is there that can play that really true, 1-3 tech, where they're lining up either shade or over the guard and just playing from there as a true between the two guards type player. So I don't like Nolen as much, just because of that similar profile from what they drafted last year.
And were you saying you don't like Nolen in Arizona, or you don't
in
like
Arizona?
Nolen in Arizona.
In Arizona, I'm gonna stand by everything Josh just said for Cincinnati. I wasn't even thinking that, but that's kind of like what sparked the Darius Robinson thought for me. So I would prefer a more true 1 or 3 tech. Not Walter Nolen's he's not Darius Robinson, but he's got a little bit more of that position flexibility to him, where he's not giving you that big, massive body in the center that I kind of wanted from Arizona.
And let's say Arizona was looking for an interior defensive lineman. They're not going to be talked about in the first round because we don't have them graded there. But guys like Deone Walker or a guy like Shemar Turner, also playing the hybrid tweener role of playing the 3 to 5 tech, lining up on the outside rusher as well. It's more of a thing in the NFL. Like, yes, you can bring me that. How many times are you going to bring me that a game? And can I leave you in a spot instead of you wanting to bounce around back or forth? If a guy is really comfortable at one spot, let him develop there and split him 25% of the snaps at his other spot, just to bring some alignment versatility. But you don't want 3 or 4 guys on your defensive line all lining up in different possible scenarios, being as stocky as an interior defensive lineman is. So it's kind of playing that balance game a little bit. But unless you're Minnesota, I mean, you're the only team that can get away with that. So,
I mean, truth be told, if I was Arizona, I'd be looking for like an Alfred Collins type player a little bit later. I think that would fit a lot better, just because of where I think if Kenneth Grant's sitting there and they feel like that's the biggest hole in their board, absolutely. I think that there's a world where that definitely exists. I know that we were just talking yesterday about Kenneth Grant going back to school. Really happy that he chose to come out for the draft. I think it's the best decision. But
I will say my heart went down just a little. Like, there is a world in my head where Kenneth Grant comes to Buffalo. It's an aggressive trade up to go get him. But
maybe not, though. I mean, and Bill talks about it all the time, where you're graded somewhere. You never know. And I don't think last year's draft is a good basis for anything, because last year was a fluke. And it was so ridiculous, the number of offensive players, and it's probably a once in every 50 years type thing. But I understand where he's coming from with that. And there's a chance that Grant is, hanging out there, like to the very, very end of the first round. I think there's a decent possibility. I don't think it'll happen, but I think there's a possibility that it'll happen.
No, because there's going to be so many guys grouped between that 25 to 45 range on your big board, and most of them are going to be on the front 7. So you got, like, for me, I have around 16 to 18 people in my top 75 as an edge rusher alone. And that's taking into consideration guys like LT Overton, who could split time inside, Jordan Burch, who can split time inside. And then we're going to have probably a good 8 or 9 guys we're talking about here that legitimately deserve to be drafted in the second and high third rounds in the interior defensive line. So you're going to see a lot of guys with those higher grades, especially in the 10, 20 to 30 range of the first round. Some of those guys might start falling down the board because of how low some of these offensive positions are. Some teams are going to grab guys that are a little bit lower graded just because the supply and demand that goes into it. So there's going to be a lot of quality guys, especially in day 2 of this draft class.
Okay, so we've definitely done a really good job in the top 5 guys. Like, I like the way we covered, even though we didn't get to the point where we could talk about the guys with the high ceiling. I would like to pivot to the Rylie Mills and Shemar Turners of the world. So, Josh, where do you have Rylie Mills and Shemar Turner? And I tried to put your board up there, but it wasn't going to be readable. So, it was just a Google sheet, and the font wasn't going to show up. No, don't worry about it.
Let's
where do you have Mills and Turner?
So I have Mills slightly higher than Turner, but we'll get into that in a second. For me, Rylie Mills was a guy that I just got into today, and I really liked what he brings as a pass rusher. It was really surprising to me to see how productive he was in that fast hit. And even though this is a guy that could add some mass to the next level, I got him at 6'5", 3/10", 295 pounds. So there's room to fill out that frame, get hold better with his anchor and double teams and run defense. But his effort and his ability to stack and shed, especially 4 to 5 yards down the field when he gets pushed off the line of scrimmage, he stays with the run plays. He stays backside in his gaps. I love the fight that he plays in run defense. But this is a guy I'm going to have in the 3rd round range just because I think he can add some more play strength to his game. I like the solid versatility that he brings to the table. I don't know. I'm not too certain about his use of hands just yet. I like how active and engaged he is in the run game. I like his pass rush repertoire, but I think that's more him finding open space when the quarterback's hanging in there too long rather than him using counters, swipes, swims, top downs, etc. So I think he could add room in that game as well. But this is a really smart football player with a high IQ. Notre Dame's interior defensive linemen and all over the defense produce high IQ players. And his pass rush production this year has been really impressive to me. So I don't see a world where this guy should fall out of the 3rd round. But if he does, that's a really productive rotational defensive tackle you're getting in round 4, and you better be lucky you get him.
Yeah, and I've just pulled your board up, so I just now noticed that you have a day 3 grade in Shemar Turner.
Yes, but it's a 4th round grade, and that could go up because this is one of the guys that we're talking about that could really improve his stock during the Senior Bowl and the Combine, because this guy's going to test out of this world for an interior. He's got those freak movement skills. He's got all the desirable traits that translates to the NFL, and he's had that ever since he's came out of high school. But for me, it's just the overall consistency for me. How effective will his pass rush be? How effective will he be on run defense down to down? It's an effort thing for me more than an athletic ability thing for me. I think he has it in the take. I just want to see it on down the downs, but really good versatility. A guy you could legitimately line up on the edge to contain the edge on a 4-man front. You can stick him inside. He can work well there. That's where he's done this year with Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton working the outsides on that 4-man front. So the versatility is going to be his calling card for me, along with his athletic ability, his twitchiness, his move off the line of scrimmage, his play speed. It's just his mental processing for me. How consistent is that on 3 downs? And that plays into the run and pass game. So a guy with a sky-high ceiling, unlimited potential. But when you're talking about the floors of this draft class, it's one of the lower floors, in my opinion.
Okay. Hey, Newt, can you talk a little bit about Alfred Collins and TJ Sanders, who you have higher and why?
You really not going to let me talk about Rylie Mills? That's just cold, man.
No, we'll pivot back.
No.
No, okay, and throw Rylie Mills into that group of 3. No, he's your guy. I got to let you. You're right. No, I didn't give you that chance to do the rebuttal. So
I'll answer the first question. I just had to get that in there. I really like Alfred Collins. I think he was a guy, and I had to do some thinking. I looked first. I saw his PFF grades, and he's a 5-year player. Came in that COVID season. He's a 5-star recruit, really a highly touted recruit for Texas to get. And it seemed like it took him forever to get onto the field. You think about last year, it's kind of understandable with the 2 defensive tackles that Texas had. But then this year, either the switch clicked, whatever it was, man, this guy has been lights out. And I think the only reason I have him as currently a 3rd round grade, which is more of like a 2nd, 3rd round grade, it's just because I want to see it a little bit more. I would have liked to see him pop a little bit earlier in his collegiate career, but there are obviously, like I mentioned, some caveats to that. I think that Alfred Collins, if we're talking about 3rd round guys, has probably the highest ceiling of my 3rd round guys that I have listed that you can see kind of in that graphic. I think that Alfred Collins is another guy that when you start looking at the numbers that he can put up, the athleticism that he brings to the table, he's got an opportunity to really, really take advantage of this draft process because he's already shown what he can do in this year of starting at Texas, where he's put up great run defense grades. And I mean, this guy if he is within arm's reach of you, he's going to get his big, strong hands on you like a bear and just rip you to the ground. And it's wonderful to see that just if you're anywhere in this guy's bubble, you're going down. And I think he also brings kind of like the weirdest spin move I've ever seen. It's like a slow moving carousel, but he's trying to incorporate them, and I really respect that he's working on his game with that. It's got some room to grow in that area, but I think that he brings a ton of things to the table. He does a lot of things really well in terms of the finer points. He's a really good tackler. And that bodes well to his run defense grade, but he's going to be one that is a player that I could see continuing to grow throughout this process. So I have him a little bit higher than TJ Sanders. I think TJ Sanders is a little bit of a similar mold where he's had a really good year this year, but he's kind of grown into this. South Carolina has been a school that has been kind of churning out some of these players, and he's just one of the next ones up for this. He's going to be a guy that, while he's a little bit, not a little bit, he's lighter. He's lighter for the position. He's about 290 is what South Carolina has him listed at. So that tells me he's probably about like 280, 282, given how these guys play and their weights being listed. But he puts up production. And obviously you go and you take a look at collegiate versus NFL, there's going to be a difference there. But he knows how to win given his physical limitations with his size. He's a freak athlete. Like he can do things that a lot of people can't because of the way that he knows the game and the athletic tools he's given. So I think he's a guy for me that's got a little bit of a lower ceiling because right now he's winning off a lot of athleticism. And I think that he's maximizing that potential, and kudos for him for being able to do that. But I think that's only going to get him so far, where if you took a look at Alfred Collins, I think he's doing similar things, but he's winning a little bit more off his size, his weight, his technique, and he's showing that progression now this year where he's gotten the chance and he's really, really boomed, where TJ Sanders has kind of been doing that for a couple of years and stayed at that status quo.
No, and I'll bounce off of Newt just real quick. You're not too low on Alfred Collins. I went over him today. Oh, that was the first guy I really, really wanted to watch. He's the second-round grade for me. I don't think there's a better run-defending defensive tackle in this class than Alfred Collins. And if you're getting that in the NFL and that's all you're getting, so be it. I'll take it.
I love that.
Okay. And the reason, and I think a TJ Sanders to Rylie Mills comparison is where I was driving to. I did not mean to shortchange it on Rylie Mills, Newt. That was definitely a faux pas on the moderator.
No, so if I look at Rylie Mills versus TJ Walker, there's obviously a ton of similarities in their game. You look at their size, you look at the length that they have. Both of them are a little bit lighter frame, a little bit more length, but you look at Rylie Mills, he's a little bit longer. He's a little bit heavier. He's going to be able to do, just in my opinion, a little bit more with that. And I think that Rylie Mills right now, he's like the inverse of Tyleik Willams is the way I see him. He's not a detriment to you on first and second down, but by no means is he going to be like your first choice to go out there. That's like a very easy thing to point out to him. As Josh said, he's got the ability to put a little bit more weight on his frame. He's a really smart player. He's a really coachable player. If he gets a little bit more mass on his frame, I'm not saying to the point where he's 320 or something like that, but he gets a little more mass on his frame. He's able to hold up a little bit better anchor and hold the point against double teams. And if he's ever put single team, be able to get a hand out there, because I think that he's the type of player where if he can get those pieces of his game to a point where they're adequate for the NFL level, then he's going to be able to understand what techniques, what things need to go into first and second down, and he's going to be able to accomplish that really, really well. Just like I said for Tyleik Willams for third down. I don't think TJ Sanders is going to be quite there. I think, like I said, there are things that like TJ Sanders is maximizing every bit of gifts he's been given, and I think he is at his ceiling right now where he doesn't have a ton to grow into. And there are some things that might start to show up when he's put at the next level, where I think Rylie Mills has the ability to kind of continue growing a little bit. So both similar players collegiately, but I think there's a little bit more to Rylie Mills' game, which is why I have him ranked ahead of TJ Sanders.
And Josh, where do you have Mills and Sanders? Who do you have higher, and how different is it? And granted, I'm looking at your board, but
very closely graded him. New hit on all the points, but I have Sanders slightly above him. They're both third round grades in my mind. And the only thing that differentiates the two is I look for those freak movement skills. And if you have a good attitude, if you're a good character with good effort, good mental processing, those physical special traits are going to grade a little bit higher on my board than the every down-to-down consistency. Both similar molds, but I just like the get off. I like the bend a little bit more in TJ Sanders' game when he's rushing the passer. Those are some freak things that you translate from college to the NFL, and it makes an immediate impact right away. While they're both not ideal run defenders and both need to add mass, and they have their limitations in their athletic ability just with their length profile with TJ Sanders at times, his height, et cetera, et cetera. Those freak movement skills when he's getting off the line, when he's getting out of his stance, I think just hold a little bit more to me than Rylie Mills, but both are really sound third-round defensive tackle prospects, guys that I really have no complaints on besides little technical things of their game.
Yeah, and I have kind of like pointed out, like just looking at Josh's board, I've got TJ Sanders right about the same spot that Josh does, maybe like a touch lower, but he's a really firm third round guy for me. I've got him like just the middle of it, but there's obviously a lot of things that I see similar as well.
Okay, so I'd like to do Deone Walker. We'll pause for a commercial break, and then we'll do guys like Omarr Norman-Lott, anybody filling after him. But with Deone Walker, talk about him a little bit. And one of the things that I heard, and I don't remember what podcast it was, but somebody compared him to T'Vondre Sweat last year. So, and not necessarily from the body type, but more maybe from the draft buzz. So talk about what you see in his game, how high would you take him, that kind of thing. So, Newt, go ahead with Deone Walker.
So I like you say that I think a little bit more like Siaki Ika is the player that kind of pops in my head where, man, you look at this freaky dude that can do a lot of things, but just doesn't all the time. There's so many times, and like I stopped using it as an excuse, like, oh, I'm going to turn on the Kentucky game because they're playing against Deone Walker. And like 90% of the snaps, it's like this guy's dominating Deone Walker because the guy's not even trying. And it's frustrating to watch because he could be so much better than he is. And obviously, if you take a look at it, if you were to look only at his freshman and sophomore year, it is insane what this guy was able to do as a true freshman at Kentucky playing in the SEC. He was a 2022 freshman All-American team, 2022 second team All-SEC as a freshman. Like, this guy was nuts. Look at that. He was then first team All-SEC last year. He was fourth team All-American last year. Like, the pedigree that this guy brought from his recruiting status into his first 2 years at Kentucky were amazing. And I don't know if it has been teams just have understood how this guy operates and they schemed around him. But from what I saw on tape, it's just that he's not really utilizing the things that he needs to do on a down-by-down basis. He stands up too tall. I mean, the guy's 6'6". It's understandable that he's going to have issues with leverage, but he's not really even trying to get down to the point, especially in run defense, where he's able to stack and shed some of those guys. And he's getting moved way more often than he should be. So with that, this is a guy that, and he's going to test out really well, I'm sure. But there's just so many things that I look at his game where I wonder, like, hey, are you going to do this at a consistent basis? I don't think for me that there are any like character concerns, like off-field concerns. I think he's a pretty focused guy and he's a pretty good kid. But there's just some things where he's got to be able to put it together better. And I want to see that more on a down-by-down basis because I've seen what he can do, and I love what he can do. But I want him to do it 4/5 of the time, not 1/5 of the time right now. So that's where I stand on Deone Walker. I still got a solid third-round grade on him because, man, if he puts it together, like he could be a game wrecker. But it's just been too many snaps this year where he hasn't. That's why he's fallen to the third round for me.
How about you, Josh?
Brutally honest, Deone Walker is unplayable year one. You cannot play this guy year one in the NFL. And it's so sad because, like Newt's point, dominant freshman and sophomore year really had all the tools and production. And for guys projecting, like we do, projecting players to the NFL coming into this season, he's like, oh, we're like, wow, this is a freak of nature unicorn defensive tackle. And yeah, he's a unicorn, but the leverage issue has gone from bad to worse, in my opinion. it's a stamina thing, like we've talked about with Kenneth Grant. Even if he's tired, he'll still get effort on the play, even if it's not 100%. If Deone Walker's tired on the field, he's not moving off the ground. Like, he's staying in his spot and he's letting people run him over, which is unacceptable for a guy that big at that mass. I also might think it's a weight issue a little bit. I think he's verified at 6'7", and yeah, you got a lot of mass on your frame, but if you're not able to hold that down and use it effectively, what good does it do? You're 350 pounds and you're not able to use your strength and any bull rush power at all. I think this guy thinks he's a finesse rusher, and he has film on tape his sophomore year and this year where he uses his hands and he has the agility to get around interior defensive linemen. You like the versatility because who the hell is a 350-pound defensive tackle lining up as a 9 tech on the outside beating people with power? I mean, that's freaky stuff, but I think he's stuck in his head. That's who he is as a pass rusher instead of using his leverage and his strength to his advantage. I mean, doesn't anchor well in the run game for a guy that should, doesn't bring consistent motor, isn't really impactful besides once a quarter where he'll make a splash play. There's way too many things to fix with Deone Walker. Like we've talked about with Will Campbell on the offensive line, there's a lot of things you need to fix, but you can play him right away in the NFL and he'll bring you some type of floor, even if the variance of who we think Will Campbell is differs from person to person. Deone Walker, if you put him out on the NFL field right now, I'm sorry, 2 plays in, he's either getting put on his ass or he's just not getting off the line of scrimmage. So I don't know if he needs to lose more weight. He definitely needs more coaching because all the physical tools are there. This is a unicorn defensive tackle prospect. It's a lot of work needs to be done with Deone Walker. In all honesty, this is a 4th-round prospect grade for me with athletic ability and tools of a top 10 pick. It's very weird.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's pause for a quick commercial break. Josh, do you want to tell everybody who you are, how they can find you?
Yeah, you guys can follow me at Juice_T23. My name is Josh Townsend, former student at the Scouting Academy. Now I'm working with the NFL Draft Fanatic on these podcasts, giving you guys the most in-depth draft analysis with Newt and many others that we've worked with on this podcast. Also in an internship with Luke Stranaut at Scouts Eye View. We'll be posting content here on Twitter once college season starts to get down and underway. And we'll be at the Reese's Senior Bowl this year, working on credential passes. If not, we'll definitely be at the game. So make sure to check me out. We'll definitely be posting updates from there. And then all across draft season, we'll be coming at you with these podcasts and our in-depth analysis as well.
So, Newt, how about you?
Yeah, so similar mold. You can find me on Twitter, NFL Draft _Weston. Stay fairly active on there. I've been lately trying to get a lot more of the write-ups from the interior offensive line and defensive tackle group written up on the website that I run, zerotechdraft.com, getting those posted and out. Aside from that, it's going to be a lot of the episodes that you see me here on the Mrs. Our Relevant podcast, kind of weighing in now that we've gotten done with our positional rankings, starting to look at a couple other positions, and then some of the elements that go into the pre-draft process, like we've been talking about here. So NFL Draft _Weston. Check me out on there. Love to have a follow from you.
Fantastic. So you can, if you are one of the 100 people watching, hit that subscribe.
Yeah.
Hit that like.
There we go. Love it.
Give the channel a follow at NFL Draft Fanatic. The channel has daily draft podcasts. So every day it's different people, but you'll see Josh on a couple different days. You've seen Newt on a couple different days, kind of thing. So there's about 21 people delivering content on the Draft Professor channel, which is at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. And one of the things that the Draft Professor has is an interactive mock draft simulator. So that means if fans don't pick a player, they drop. And one of the players dropping right now is Omarr Norman-Lott. So if you go in and there's been about 400 mocks done on the site over the last 48 hours. And Omarr Norman-Lott currently is going in round 5 because nobody's picking him. So the question would be, what is let's say, who is Omarr Norman-Lott? What's his game, and where do you think he should be taken? And Josh, I'm going to let you kick that one off.
So Omarr Norman-Lott is, let's go over the good first. This is one of the freakiest get-off bend pass rushing 3-techs in this draft class. Tennessee doesn't play him on a full 75 to 80% of their snaps. He's more of a 50% guy. But when he's on the field, he's disruptive. His first step get off is one of the best in this draft class. His agility to use his hands and get inside, outside between interior defensive linemen. He has a relentless pursuit when he's on task, on target, getting to the quarterback. This is a guy that's going to have one of the most pass rushing upsides for a 3-tech in this draft class. That comes with some negatives, though. Even though he has improved greatly in run defense from last year to this year, it's still adequate at best. He still gets moved off the spot a couple times. His leverage can start to go down once he gets into those run stuffing scenarios compared to his pass rush. His pass rush leverage is very good. His leverage in the run game is solid at best. Even though he has taken some improvements, that still needs to be an area of growth for him. His versatility, this is a guy you want to be plugging at a 3-tech, really don't want to be messing around for where he's going to put. So not really the deterrent on his scouting report, but it's an intangible thing for me. You got to look at the full picture with prospects, and that's taken into account off-field stuff, character actions on the field, and you'll see this guy in the mix between that Florida-Tennessee fight last year, getting right into the middle of it, causing havoc for no reason. Getting off assignment on plays, not holding his gap integrity and run defense. Also just doing extracurricular stuff out once the play is over, whether it's diving at people's knees or it's kicking the football while the ball is dead, just little stuff like that. Those are the intangible things that I do take into consideration when I'm grading these prospects, because you're not just grading the football player, you're grading the person as well. And I'm not trying to destroy Norman-Lott's character, because I'm sure this is a great guy off the field with a good personality, a good shoulder on his head. But when he's on the football field, the mental processing can get away from him a little bit. He needs to really realign his focus at times, especially when he's using that to his run defense. But when you're talking about freak moving interior defensive linemen, this is one of the best in this draft class, and that's going to give him a stock high draft position, whether you like it or not. Because of those abilities, I have him as a 3rd-round grade. This is a guy with improvements to his run defense, can turn into a true 3-down 3-tech. It's just being able to get his head on right when he's on the football field and really just bringing that consistency and run defense. But as a pass rusher, this is one of the best.
So, Newt, how about you? What's your assessment?
It's for the on-field stuff. It's echoing the exact same thing. I don't think that he brings you really anything in run defense. He's a guy that's going to be a freaky athlete and get at the quarterback really well. This guy, truthfully, was meant to be about 2 inches taller and have a little bit more speed and be an edge defender. Like that.
Okay.
That's what he was meant to be. And somewhere along the line, he just didn't quite get that length that he needed. He's a guy that he's gone through Arizona State and then now Tennessee, and he really flourished at Tennessee. Tennessee is, I think, a good enough program where they were able to rein in a lot of things and put him kind of into the role that fits him best. And I think he excels in that role really, really well. He's a guy that, like Josh said, he's only playing about 50% of the snaps. Like, if you look at his numbers compared to everyone else in this draft class, he's playing 30, 35 snaps a game, which for me, I hate to see, because I want to see what you're doing throughout the entire course of a game. But regardless, what he's doing when he's on the field, especially in pass rushing downs, is really good. But Josh hit it on the head. There's so many things with this guy. And we already mentioned it with Deone Walker in terms of he doesn't have character concerns. There's just some things that I want to see with his effort improve. Omarr Norman-Lott does have character concerns for me. What Josh mentioned with some of the dirty hits, with the low hits, you take a look at the scuffle last year. You even look at this year with the University of Kentucky, the shove on the quarterback out of bounds, him running through Connecticut last year with a flag after they pummeled him 56-3. And then there was the clip of him tapping the UTEP quarterback on the shoulder after he threw a pick. You're 11th ranked Tennessee, man. grow up a little bit and play the game.
He faked the injury this year too. If I'm not mistaken.
I put that. So yeah. So for those that don't know, like there's a clip of him walking. What was it, like 2 minutes left or something like that?
Yeah.
And then he looks at the sideline and then he just goes down. I put it a little bit more the coaching staff. I tried not to. Of course, it had Omarr Norman-Lott name tied to it. I was like, but I think it was a little bit more the coaching staff. But of course, it had to be him. That faked injury was awful. But there's just it's like every one of those things. Like you keep bringing them up more and more and more. And I dare anyone out there listening, go type in Omarr Norman-Lott on Twitter and take a look at the first 10 posts. Look at how many of them are positive versus how many of them are negative. And you're going to find a lot more negative than positive because of this kind of like concern that people have over him and this tradition of him just being a little bit of an immature athlete. So I've got him lower than Josh. I think that the athletic and gameplay are really, really good. But for me, he's like 4th, 5th round because it's a guy that, while he's a great football player in that sense of a third down pass rushing player, I don't see him having a high ceiling because I don't know how much he's going to be willing to put the work in. And I'm concerned about what he's going to be able to bring my team in terms of like the locker room and what negative effects I give there. So, I mean, 4th, 5th round, that's my grade on him. If you were to say, hey, Packers have a chance to grab him at the end of the 4th round, do you want him? I'd say, hell no. I do not want this guy in our locker room at all. And I hate it. I hate to say that about a guy, but it's just so many things that he's put forward that I can't stand. So that's where I stand on him. I knew I was probably going to be a little bit lower. I'm glad to see like it's kind of a growing common thing that we're seeing with this kid where he's a freaky athlete, but he's got a lot of things to clean up.
Yeah, and I think we need to pivot away. We don't want to be the podcast that's like hating on players, right? That's probably
Jim. You were the one. You were the one shitting on him on the college football preview.
I did. You are right. I did. But is there, Newt? Is there anybody else on your graphic that you want to talk about? We haven't. I don't think we've talked about Capehart or Stackhouse, and it looks like you've got round 4 or 5 grades on them.
I want to talk about, so I know that I can guarantee at least that Josh is going to want to talk about Cross. I would actually myself, and I know it sounds like, Josh, do you have Burch graded as a defensive end?
Yes, I do. I think that's one of the guys you can play.
I've already moved him to edge in the database.
That's fair. I want to talk about him from what I've seen from him.
Okay.
Which I've got him graded as a defensive tackle, but I can see him going both ways, and some of the better plays I've seen from him have been on the edge. So might not fit in this mold as well, but I really, really like Jordan Burch and his ability to play all 3 slots. And I know that, I talked about Shemar Turner, and we talked about this when we broke both players down. Shemar Turner to me looked like Isaiah Simmons for the Cardinals, where he looked like a guy without a home.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Burch looked like a guy that can like live in multiple places and thrive. So it feels eerily similar where we're talking about this multi-positional guy, but I think Burch shows what you want to see from it, where you see a guy really thriving in both positions. And Turner, for me, I think that his production went down this year because he isn't like a true defensive 3 tech.
Yeah.
And he doesn't necessarily have the tools as an outside player. I think for me, he gets caught in between, but I think that Burch, I think he can survive and he can thrive in both positions. So I love this guy's run defense. I loved his length. I loved how he used all of that really, really well. And if he ends up playing in a, 4-3 as a defensive end, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because I think he has the ability to do that. I don't think he's one of the top 5 defensive ends in this draft, but I think he's got the ability to offer a lot to defense where, hey, we want this guy to be on 3 downs. Jordan Burch can do that with ease. He puts up really, really good numbers for pass rush, but I think he's got a really good run defense floor to him, where it's going to be really enticing for a team. I like him at that end of the second round, maybe second, third round. But he's a guy that I think is closer. I'm closer with him and Derrick Harmon than I think most are. But I think that Jordan Burch is going to be another guy that, depending on where he goes, he could really, really show up at the next level. So,
no, I absolutely agree with you on Jordan Burch. And this is going to be a ridiculously deep edge rusher class. And that's why you'll see guys like Jordan Burch and like LT Overton in a way get moved to the interior rankings just so you could balance it out. But like you said, in a 4-3, I think this guy can stick as a defensive end. For being what he is, 295, I think this is the skinniest 295-pound player I have ever seen in my life. You don't see it with his athletic ability at all. He uses his strength really well. And one thing that I like to see with prospects is building upon year after year of production. The versatility he brings, yes, you're going to get that in the NFL, absolutely. But the improvements he's made as a run defender and really as a pass rusher, adding multiple moves to the bag and really improving on that year after year is really encouraging, because this is an easily coachable guy, a team guy that will play core special teams roles right away. And he's really a freak athlete in a different sense that you would think about. He has good speed and good burst and get off for 295 pounds, and that's him sticking as an edge. Imagine that on the inside. Now you have to worry about how well he'll hold as an anchor if you're moving him as a 3 or a 5 tech, how well he'll be able to stay one-on-one and shed those tackles if he moves fully inside. But you love the versatility that he brings. And like you said, in this extremely deep edge rusher class, I'll have him graded as an edge, but he's still a late second round grade for me. And I have him in my top 64, and he's really close with Harmon as well. I have Harmon slightly above, but neck and neck right next to each other.
Okay. Any other players that are in the top 15, Newt, that you'd like to give some time to? I mean, obviously, we have covered scouting reports on these players in detail that people can go back and watch. But anybody that you think you want to mention as to like why you put them where you did?
No, I want to hear. I'm really excited to hear Josh's take on Cross. I don't think that there are any guys that are in there. I'll give a shout out really quick. Ty Hamilton, I think he's a guy we watched really, really early in the process. I think Ty Hamilton is a guy that he's not, and I talk about this with offensive players. Ty Hamilton is not a sexy defensive lineman in the slightest. He's going to be fairly vanilla for a lot of things, but he is the creamiest, the silkiest French vanilla that you've ever had in your entire life. And I think he's going to make a damn good career out of just being that really, really good vanilla ice cream, because he's adequate as a run defender. He's adequate as a pass rusher. He doesn't stand out, but he doesn't hurt you at all. He's going to be a guy that you're probably not playing in year one. You're probably getting him used to the system. He's kind of figuring things out, but he's a smart guy. He can play within really any fit, I think, given his size profile. A little bit lighter, but he's going to be someone that can fit in that either 4-3 or 3-4 and thrive with that. I shouldn't say thrive, but be a guy that is able to receive contracts year after year after year. He'll be a 10-year guy in the NFL, and one that I think, it's like I said, it's not sexy, but he's going to be someone that is going to be a name that you're going to consistently hear about year after year.
No, that's awesome. That's the one guy that I'm really looking forward to, him and Aneas Peebles, to get into his film next. But I'll shine the light on probably my favorite interior defensive tackle in this class, and Howard Cross. This is a guy with second-round, first-round production and a fifth-round, sixth-round body. Let's be honest. You're not going to get the freaky athletic tools with Howard Cross. That's just who he is. He's undersized. He's under height. He's underweight, but I don't care. This guy has IQ through the roof. He knows where to be in his spots and his stunts and twists. He gives all-out effort in the run game, even if he doesn't have the strength to hold up that anchor. I just really like the overall game of Howard Cross, how relentless he is, how experienced of a starter he is. I love the leverage that he plays with. I love the nuanced use of hands, especially in pass rush one-on-one situations. He used that leverage and use of hands really nicely to win with speed to the outside, to win with agility. And this is one of the few guys in this draft class, while he might not have the measurables like everybody else, that's going to be the deterrent on him. If he gets hot, this guy can get rolling for a good 3 plays in a row and really impact the quarterback, make him move off his spots. And if he doesn't have the finishing numbers that you'll expect out of a pass rusher with his sacks, he'll definitely make an impact with his pass rush win rate and his presser percentage. So this is a guy that all likelihood will fall into day 3, and someone like the Eagles are going to take him, and we're all going to be like, oh, gosh, here we go. But Howard Cross, 2nd-round production and the 5th-round body, I love everything that he brings to the table.
I love that. I think he's got the – so if you were to tell me he is the 4th defensive tackle in a group, and I'd be like, man, that's a strong-ass group right there because – he's a guy, like you said, and kind of going back, you brought it up with like Grant and Nolen, and I like that thought. You're putting a team out there in a 2-minute defense. You're going to want Howard Cross out there every time because he's got that ability to get after the quarterback. He's going to be coming with that motor, and the way he's able to handle guys that are 30 pounds heavier than him with a little bit of finesse, but also like a strength profile that's adequate enough. I really like. I do not like this guy in early downs.
No.
There's just it shows up. It really does. I've seen him at times, especially if he's trying to bullish. It's like running into a brick wall. But I think he's a smart enough guy where he's learning the technique to kind of get around that. So I definitely do like him as a strong rotational piece in a defensive front. He could easily be kind of like your 3rd down go-to guy and make a living off of that quite easily.
And that's going to be the difference between each guy, each scout that you talk about. Where are they projecting their projectability compared to what traits that you bring to the table is where you're going to have different interior defensive lines stacked up. Like for me personally, Norman-Lott's ability to get after the quarterback and his freak movement skills are going to hold more weight for me. So he's going to be slightly higher graded than Howard Cross. But for me, Howard Cross brings all the intangible, high IQ, motor, effort, all the little things that are swept under the rug to the table. That's a guy I would take above Deone Walker, who brings little to nothing of that, but he has all the freak, athletic, unicorn traits that you bring. So it really varies from each person that you talk about, who values what, where they value him, how they grade said person. But that's just a little bit of a difference, how people can have grades on different players.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep. So let's close out this episode. I want to give everybody here a few reminders as to what's coming up next. So Josh is normally on Monday nights, and Jake and Josh are going to start covering other positions. They just did a lot of running backs and a lot of linebackers. Like, I don't think you're going to find too many draft podcasts that cover 32 linebackers. I'm just saying, right? Like, so if you want to learn a lot about linebackers, check the YouTube channel. There's a linebacker channel. You're going to see Jake and Josh on it a lot. They've recorded, I think, let's say 6 or 7 episodes where they covered 4 to 6 linebackers each, as well as 4 to 6 running backs. So you get, 35 running backs, 35 linebackers on that channel. So that's going to be some good stuff. But I believe they're pivoting to Senior Bowl players as well as covering other position groups. So I believe wide receiver is coming up next.
Yeah, we're going over Savion Williams, Jack Best out of TCU. We're going over the Iowa State wide receivers that I needed to get into: Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Antonio Williams out of Clemson, Pat Bryant out of Illinois. All these guys that are getting grouped into the Senior Bowl, and while it might not be the wide receiver class we got last year, definitely some quality guys in this group, and that goes back to my roots. I'm a former wide receiver, so those are really guys I'm excited to talk about. But I'll leave you a little tidbit before we get out of here. If you guys go to the linebacker and running backs episode, you'll see all of our grades and scouting reports on each prospect. But I want to put my flag down for one player that needs to be talked about. I have Jahad Campbell as a firm top 10 prospect in this draft class. It's going to vary from different people, but if I was to plant a flag, Jahad Campbell is a top 10 player in this draft class, and a lot of people need to be talking about him more.
And I want to give you a shout out, Josh, because we covered Campbell 6 to 8 weeks ago. He was one of the first linebackers we covered, and you said round one. I am starting to see the media say Jahad Campbell round one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the great thing about Draft Professor is we're able to plant some flags. And if you were to watch Newt and Owen and they covered offensive line and interior, we had some flags planted, I think, on some interior offensive linemen specifically that nobody's talking about. Armaj Reed Adams from Texas A&M, Luke Kandra from Cincinnati are two that immediately come to mind. And Newt, if there's another one you want to shout out that I'm forgetting, but I think those are two guys that I don't think too many people are talking about right now.
No, Luke Kandra is a lot of fun. We've talked about him a handful of times now. He's a player that I think watching him, he lights things up. He plays at a high IQ level. But there have been a couple of them throughout the time that we've been watching guys. So, yeah, if you want to check out some of those, Owen and I, there are times that we see guys eye to eye, and then there are other times where Owen is like, this is my guy. I was a little bummed that he wasn't going to be able to be here for Derrick Harmon because he's a Harmon truther through and through. And I think I was talking to Josh about that before the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really want to hear you two talk about him because it's a lot of fun hearing him talk about him because that's his guy for sure. But yeah, no, we went through defensive tackle, interior offensive lineman. I think we not as much as Josh. He's shaming me. I think we went through about 25 guys each.
Josh and Jake had a 2-week head start. Don't compare numbers. He had a 2-week head start.
We're I think next week we're looking at positional value, which I know Jim already hates me about for that. A little bit of teaser there.
No, it's going to be a great podcast because
it will be. It'll be fun.
Next week, Newt and Owen and I are doing what positions would you build a franchise around? And one of the things that Newt threw into the group chat was his grading scale, and he had linebackers all the way at the bottom. And I said, well, we're going to have good content because linebackers are one of the positions I would build a team around. So it's going to be a great discussion.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
And then
what we're doing,
I think the week after is going to be interior offensive line rankings, an episode really similar to this, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then we'll get quarterback rankings.
Wide receivers.
And wide receiver, yep. Yeah, wide receiver will be the next group that we really, really break down. Probably like a top 10, top 15.
When you guys were talking about interior offensive linemen, I wanted to ask you, Newt, have you watched Dylan Fairchild out of Georgia yet?
Yeah, I watched Fairchild out of Georgia. He was, I think, our last episode. We did him and Rutledge together.
What are your thoughts on him?
Let me pull my grading up for him. I've got him right now as a late third, early fourth. For me, he's a guy that like I can see the things that go into him, like the wrestling background, size and strength, and he's done a really good job of kind of getting to a point where he's minimizing pressures. But I think that there are some things that like you look at pro level defenders and they're beating him with, like he's not great with counter moves. He's not a guy that like stands out in one area to me. So I think that there are some holes in his game still. Are you the Fairchild truther? That's
no, that's
like,
Clint. I'm
okay.
I'm hopping on that train. He's a top.
Okay.
So I was wondering where you had him. You've been over him before.
Yeah, he's currently number 99 on my board.
All right, he fits the 100. We'll take it.
Yeah, he's top 100. Top 100. Tate Ratledge was way up there for me. He was interior offensive lineman number 2.
That was more impressive. Okay.
So, Josh, where do you have Fairchild relative to Luke Kandra or Armaj Reed Adams?
So I'm a little bit lower on Reed Adams. For me, he's one of the best strength interior offensive linemen in this class that need to clean up penalties and use of hands for me. So that's dragged him down to a 4th round grade for me. Kandra, haven't done a full scouting report yet. He would fit in my top 100 for sure, though. And Fairchild is right there in my 2nd round range of interior offensive linemen, but I don't have many of them so far.
Yeah. Okay. So you did Reed Adams with us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, that's okay. That was the 3-headed episode. Yes.
Yep. I was Debbie Downer on Reed Adams.
I think I sat in the middle. Owen was pretty high.
Yeah. He texted me after. He was like, "Hey, what games did you watch for Reed Adams? Like, my brain's confused. I need to figure out if I got this right or not." I was like, we had a little conversation, but no, Reed Adams is really intriguing.
Yeah,
cool. So every podcast night will eventually cover every positions. The only difference is the order, right? So by the time Josh and Jake get done with wide receivers, Newt and Owen will be starting wide receivers. So if you want to learn more about wide receivers, you either go to the wide receiver channel or you just change what night you watch the podcast, right? You're going to get 2nd, 3rd, and 4th opinions because Randall and Bill have already gone through 40 wide receivers and 40 corners on Friday night.
Those guys are nuts.
Right? And now the list of wide receivers that we cover is significantly less because we've eliminated a few guys from the list, right? So other people will benefit from the scouting reports that different people gave. So, anyways, for everybody watching, on behalf of Josh, Newt, myself, thank you from everybody at the Draft Professor. Thank you. We will be back again tomorrow night. Bill Sparks is going to be doing some Senior Bowl content. So I look forward to seeing you there. If you want to learn more about the players that are going to be in Mobile, we are going to continue that coverage that Jake and Josh started on Wednesday on Monday, and we're just going to keep going. So just lots of Senior Bowl content coming your way on Mondays and Fridays. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thanks, guys.